Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everybody Matters, our family and friends chat. I'm Jill Catherine, the host of our chat, and very happy to be here today. Um, as you know, we get together once a month as an opportunity for me to answer any questions that you have, and also to provide you with some insights and some education and some support for you as you're dealing with your loved one and as you're learning to support your loved one who is struggling with an eating disorder or body dissatisfaction or disordered eating. And I know it's not an easy thing to do by any means. Complicated relationships with food and body complicate our lives very deeply. Food is essential to our existence for this body, and we live in a world that has very complex ideas and harming viewpoints about our bodies and what they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to be, and their how that relates to our value and its worth, particularly as women. But also we have very difficult definitions even for bodies and those standards for men. So this disease is a very difficult one, but it's one that allows your loved one, as they can get the support they need, it can help them to really gain a sense of self and confidence and truth and understanding that can set them up to live a life that meets their unique need, their purpose, of why they're here. You often hear me in our videos each month talk about the depth that's required in this healing process for your loved one. It requires a tremendous amount of depth for them to really dig deep below the surface of what's supposed to make us happy, why we're here, what we're really after. You really have to have a deeper thinking and exploration of who we are, how we're affected by our stresses, what we really believe, what our values are, what we're really after in our life, what brings us meaning. We have to explore these in deeper ways. The journey of living on the surface that everything outside of me is going to make me happy. That sense of that sort of thinking is what breeds a lack of self-efficacy that can really play a role in this disorder coming to life. So we have to learn how to find our strength within. So we have a number of videos, as you know, that can take you through some eating disorder 101 topics, right? And so at this stage of our collection, we go a little bit deeper into giving you insight into what it's like for the recovery process. And I share these insights with you in a way that hopefully you can hear them and understand them as it makes sense for your situation. And if you find just one little tool that can help to support your loved one, because each one of your loved ones is having their own unique experience, situation, how and why they got here are all unique. So my intention is to broadly share with you the things that we talk about in our weekly group, who are in recovery, who are actively working to heal their relationship to food and body, and to give you an insight into what those conversations are like, to help give you an opportunity to keep that conversation going with your loved one, whether they're in those conversations or not. This is an opportunity for you to sort of get the insight into the things that we're talking about. So hopefully you can cultivate an environment, a relationship, a conversation that nurtures this environment too, because that's what's so important. Though your loved one who's going through this, they can go to their therapy session, their treatment, their support group, their intensive outpatient program. When we're in all these spaces to talk about it, it's super, that's so critical for our healing. The biggest challenge is when you get out of those safe spaces and then you're back in the regular world where people are just living on the surface and they're not digging deep and they're not having honest conversations, or they're not really managing their emotions or their stresses, and when you don't know sort of how to fit, and if it's a whole different world, it's a whole different world. And so anything that you're able to do to keep nurturing these conversations with your loved one, to help be a safe space for them to keep working through the stuff, to keep learning how to managing their triggers, to keep nurturing this self-reflection and growth and deeper thinking is going to be critical to their recovery. Critical. That if they feel like they have people to go to beyond when they're in that support setting. And, what happens over time in recovery when we find our voice is that we start to find our community of people who are more like-minded and how we approach our life, and that helps us to build our sense of community for sure. And we find that community where we feel there's more meaning and more connection, and it's about purpose and doing stuff in the world and experiencing life and adventure and passion and service and whatever that looks like. That could look like any industry. That could look like any, from corporate to non. It could look like anything, but that there's a mindset. That there's a consciousness to why we're doing things. To realizing that this old thinking of beauty and body and health and all that looks like these stereotypical boxes and media images is ridiculous. It's not true. We in recovery have to wash our brains of what we've been fed, and to sort of realize that power and beauty and success and creativity and intelligence looks like, and health and fitness looks like all different bodies, and looks like all different industries, and looks like all different ways to express it. So we really have to break ourselves out of this mold that we've been driven to do, and to think like, and to be like. So how all of us go through these journeys is very different, and your ability to nurture your loved one on their own is a critical one. And one of the things that we have been discussing in our weekly group is, there's two critical components, two things that I want to share with you. And one is the two principles. One principle is don't take anything personally. Don't take anything personally. Those of us who have struggled with this, we're very sensitive, very sensitive. We're pleasers. We want to make people happy. We have a very sensitive shell, and we have a tendency to take things very personally. We let criticism and judgment affect us. The opinions of others affect us. And so we have to learn not to take things personally. We have to learn that. And one of the ways we have to learn that, one of the ways that helps us to learn that, is to realize that every single person is having their own unique experience based on their upbringing, how it feels in their body, in their mind. Every single person is having a very unique relationship. And so, not to take things personally, we have to really understand how whatever someone else is saying to us is really just a projection of what their life is within them. And yeah, people, we all have wisdom to share. We all have experience to share that we can learn from. We can learn from someone else's experience, but we're all having our own unique experience. And so sometimes if people are yelling at us or upset at us, we have to learn and be able to emotionally learn how to not take that personally to the core, to our heart, to our soul. How we have to learn how to do that. And one of the ways we learn to do that is to realize that anything anybody is saying to us, expressing to us, is a reflection, is their own relationship to themselves, is about their relationship to their own life, their own experience. And that's what it is. It's not exactly us. That's not us. It's not us personally. It's they're going through their own person and expressing it to us. And we have to learn that. And we have to learn that over time through trial and error, where we learn how, where many times, our friends and our family members could be very stressed out or something going on in their life. And if all of a sudden we get yelled at, it's not about us, it's about the stress in their life. We have to learn how to navigate those situations. We have to learn how to not take things so personally. And, if you say to someone who's in recovery, well, don't take things so personally, that's not a great place to start or to go to, because it's going to just make them defensive, right? But what could be helpful is for you to share with them, how you learn to not take things so personally, how you learn to really gain a sense of self that's independent of maybe what people say about you, what they think about you, how you start to really have that self-confidence. And, because that is practiced and learned over time. And certainly having people else in our lives who can share their experience about that and be open and talking about it, and how to not take things personally, could be a really helpful experience. The second guiding principle we talked a lot about was don't make assumptions. Not to make assumptions. And that really requires us then to use our voice, to ask for clarity, to check in with people, to not assume, to not assume. And, we talked about these two guiding principles because in recovery, you're not just working through relationship to food and body. You're working through the relationship to how you're managing life, how you're managing stress and expectations and fears and worries and doubts. Not having a knowing of how to do that is how you get to an unhealthy relationship with food and body. It's because you don't know how to deal with any of the other stuff. So in the recovery process, you have to do some food and body work for sure, but the long-term recovery is the life work. And so that's what we're always talking about here. And that is your job, really as a support to your loved one, is that part. The food and body, yeah, you can play a role a little bit with that, encouraging health at every size, beauty at every size, that, our body is, the value of our body is what it allows us to do and how it allows us to be in the world, not about what it looks like, that our sense of our our beauty and value certainly doesn't come based on the shape and size of our body, right? So you can help in that capacity, and with the food component, you could help in, learning and seeing a wholeness to food that, instead of that food is good, that food is bad, good and bad food, it could be more about, nutrition, just feeding ourselves with as much nutrition as possible and allowing ourselves to enjoy a whole variety of foods, depending on a variety of things, not really having such a strict sense, because naturally when we are feeding our bodies in nutritious foods, we naturally will want that most often, right? So there's a role you can play in that, but the broader, the more sustainable, lasting role you can play with your loved one is these life skills, emotional skills, mind, body skills. And, so these two principles of don't take things personally and don't make assumptions. So don't make assumptions is use your voice, ask, check in, for our folks who are working professionals, how often do we are assuming whatever? Instead, check in with your supervisor, check in with your staff, check in with your team, check in, say, ask. Because so that time we're going to waste, wondering and wondering and worrying and wondering and worrying, and we're making these assumptions are wasting so much time and energy. And if we can learn to use our voice, and that's one of the most hard things for those of us who have struggled with disease, is using our voice. Is there's a lot of fear around speaking our truth and using our voice, because we just have fear in that way. And I don't know if we have to analyze to the extreme why, but we just do. So how do we get the sense of strength to use our voice, to be willing to ask, to have that courage to ask, and in any way that you can help, support your loved one to use their voice, to express what they really want, to communicate with others as clearly as they can, to avoid misunderstandings, sadnesses, and drama. And that's one of the things we talk about in terms of not taking things so personally, how we give our power away in that, to suffer so much, to take it so personally that we suffer so much. So these two principles, not to make assumptions and take things so personally, really requires us to activate our voice, and would be really helpful, in your support of them is to encourage these principles, to help them to walk through that, to learn through that, and sharing your own experiences. I say this very often to you guys in these videos, is sharing your own experiences can go such a long way in it's being real, it's being authentic, it's being honest, it's being relatable. It makes you feel connected, when you do share. So that's our work for this month, is to support your loved ones and helping them not to take things so personally. And it may be something you model for them. Do you take things very personally? Do you think everything's an attack on you? And if you do, how does that affect your loved one? Do you always make assumptions? Or do you get lost in the story in your head, or do you take the time to get clear with people and check in? These are principles that we model, and we can also model and help teach at the same time. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.